Welcome back, big ballers. It's your boy, Manny James, and I'm coming at you with another episode of Fantasy Football Sports Minds. This is the Fantasy Fumble with your hosts. Here's the man, Joe Birdman. Joe, how you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing very well, Manny. Happy to be back with another week of football talk, another episode of Fantasy Fumble. And we're going to be talking about our top 20 wide receivers this week. I know you and I have talked a little bit offline, but we haven't seen each other's lists yet. So I'm excited to see what you have for me today.
Oh, yeah, it's going to be a good one, Joe. We're going to be going back and forth. But first, we're going to go ahead and give you a word here from our sponsor.
Hey there, my name is Manny James Gonzalez with PRB, and I'm a real estate agent here in Central Florida. I'm a U.S. Navy veteran, military relocation pro, and big supporter of 2A and veterans' rights. My specialty is VA transactions. I'm also experienced in all parts of real estate.
I've been living in Florida for over 20 years, and I can tell you we still believe in freedom down here. One of the greatest job markets, excellent economy, and no state income tax. When it comes to an agent, you want one that's going to be honest, not afraid of a fight, and most importantly, willing to do the things that some agents aren't willing to do.
And what's that, Manny?
Shoot straight, Dan. If you're ever considering buying in Central Florida, you need somebody you can trust, and I got your six. I'm Manny James Gonzalez, finding land for the free and home for the brave.
Welcome back, ballers. Let's get into the top 20. I'm going to kick things off with the number one wide receiver, CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb is a machine. His targets, receiving yards, and touchdowns has seen a steady increase every year. He finished last season with 195 touches, 1,862 yards, and 14 touchdowns. Now, it's obviously going to be hard for Dak to replicate that kind of production, but the Cowboys have a strong offense, and CeeDee is clearly Dak's number one target.
Yeah, I'm definitely not going to disagree with you there, Joe. And I'm going to go ahead and jump right into my number one because I also have CeeDee Lamb number one. And the reason being, he is going to get that large target share. He was definitely getting he was the leading man in the NFL last year, 181 targets. So he's going to continue to be that guy. No one's going to even come close. And after the offseason the Cowboys had not getting a running back, they're going to be passing a whole lot more. So it's just going to be that kind of season. And the Cowboys are just going to be basically trying to compete with teams to prove that they deserve to be there. But really, we all know they're going to be a fringe playoff team. So get CeeDee. He'll get his points, guys. He's going to be great for the fantasy run. Obviously, terrible for Cowboys fans. Ha, ha, ha.
I know it's hard for you to say that, Manny. I know it's hard for you to give props to the Cowboys, but you know it is due. And did you know Dak finished third last year in fantasy points? I didn't know that. So
I was definitely surprised. And the ha-ha wasn't the fact that I was giving CeeDee his props, because even coming out of college, I thought he was a great player. It's the fact that Dallas season's still going to suck, and CeeDee is going to be the lone bright spot on that whole team. He's going to be like Saquon when he was on the Giants.
I don't think it's going to be that bad, but we'll see.
Yeah, right.
Now at number two, I've got Tyreek Hill. He had another monster year last year, finished with actually 50 more receiving yards than CeeDee Lamb, and they both averaged 23 fantasy points per game. So, with a high-powered offense like the Miami Dolphins, and Tua continuing to feed him like a hungry dog, it's possible Tyreek finishes at the number one spot this year. Easily possible.
I have a slightly different opinion on number two, and it was really close for me. And the only reason why I have a different number two is because of my gut was just telling me this guy has something special. I have Amon-Ra St. Brown at number two this year. man, just because if you had him on your team last year, you know how special this guy was. He was injured. He had a torn oblique last year, and the guy came out and he just balled. I mean, for 4 weeks, the guy was just playing off, with a really bad injury, and he just tells you the type of toughness he has, and just watching like all the intangibles that he has. For example, like the team respects him as their leader already. They're like, hey, we want to work hard like this guy. We want to work harder than him. And watching the videos on his dad, like I just think overall the culture that they built has given this guy the skills and obviously the supreme route running, right, and determination and hands that he has can allow him with that target share to be potentially one of the top, if not the top, wide receiver in fantasy football this year. And that's some big balls takes right there.
That is big balls, but I completely understand. And that segues perfectly into my number 3, Amon-Ra St. Brown. I completely forgot that he was injured for about a month last year. So, man, good call on that because he muscled through that injury. He played like a champion. His mindset on top of his skill set is why he's such a good player. And everyone expected him to be good, but not that good. He had 10 touchdowns and averaged over 20 fantasy points per game. And we love, here again, we are Detroit Lions fans. We love the Detroit Lions. Their entire offense is amazing. They work together like a well-oiled machine. And, Amon-Ra finished the season with over 1,500 receiving yards. I expect that to climb higher with a strong supporting cast and Jared Goff under center. I mean, you're going to have people like Sam Laporta and Jahmyr Gibbs and Jameson Williams and Khalif Raymond getting targets too. Everyone's going to be involved. But when you have a team that's that good and their offensive line is the number 1 in the league, when you're all working together that well, it only leads to production. And again, him being injured isn't something I even thought about. So great call on that, Manny. That's why I have Amon-Ra St. Brown at the number 3 spot. And another thing is Jared Goff never gets credit that he deserves. I mean, the guy has been a stud every year he's been in the NFL, finished with over 45, actually close to 4,600 passing yards and 30 touchdowns last year. So that's a rock solid team. Amon-Ra is my number 3.
Segues into my number 3. We previously talked about him already. Tyreek Hill, right? I told you it was really close.
Yeah.
I mean, Tyreek, it doesn't matter how many options or mouths to feed there are. There's always the cheetah, right? Cheetah gets his dibs first. He's the fastest. So Tyreek is going to get in there. He's going to get his looks. And despite whether injury scare or not, what I like about his game now is Tyreek doesn't try to get hit like that anymore. He's smart. He runs out of bounds. Out of bounds.
Yeah, he's got great balance.
He has amazing balance, right? But yeah, he's definitely an amazing player, and he could potentially be number 1 overall, right? These top 3 guys could be interchangeable, and the experts probably have them in their list, like one over the other. But these are your cream of the crop. These are the guys that need to be going number 1, top 3 as far as your wide receivers are concerned.
Absolutely. Now bringing in the number 4 spot for me, and you could even argue that the top 5 guys are interchangeable. Mm-hmm. But at the 4 spot, I've got Justin Jefferson. Let's just take a look at his first 3 seasons in the NFL. 1,400 yards, 1,600 yards, 1,800 yards. He was hurt for half the season last year and still finished with over 1,000 receiving yards. Sam Darnold is a significant downgrade from Kirk Cousins. But, I mean, Jefferson has seemed to be quarterback proof. He had a few different guys thrown to him last year. And, Josh Dobbs, Sam Darnold, doesn't really matter who it is. They're going to feed him the ball. And he proved that last year that it doesn't really matter who the quarterback is. Came in at the end of the season, finished strong. He's going to have a massive target share. And I expect him to easily finish in the top 5, regardless of who's throwing him the ball. Now, we do know that J.J. McCarthy's out for the season. That sucks. But, yeah, I don't think Sam Darnold is going to be a problem. I think Justin Jefferson will continue to produce.
I'm a little bit more scared about Sam Darnold than most, I guess, and that's just because his long body of work. But I'll talk about him a little bit later. My number 4 guy I have here is actually a guy I know all too well, Mr. Number 11 for the Philadelphia Eagles, AJ Brown. He's the guy that's stepping into a new offense with Kellen Moore. It's going to be an air raid type of offense, so a lot of big air yards, a lot of big passing. A lot of people talk about Jalen Hurts' arm strength. They're going to really get to see it this year because they're going to be throwing a lot of really wide passing and really moving A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith around, which I'm surprised they never did already. So you're going to see these guys consistently getting their looks at every game, which they should have. But I think that's going to give him his – and last year alone, if you looked at him, he was still averaging 9 targets a game, and he ended up finishing with almost 300 fantasy points for the season in PPR. So, and he didn't miss a single game. So the guy's durable. He's getting his looks. Yeah, he got shut down a couple games, and he had some blow-up games, but I think this year is going to be a little bit more consistent for his points.
I agree with you, and I will touch on that a little bit more in a few minutes. Coming in at number 5 for me, I have Jamar Chase. He still passed 1,200 yards last season with Burrow missing the second half of the season. If the offense finds their rhythm, which I think they will, then Chase can easily pass 1,500 yards. So that's why I put him in the top 5 spot. You know, T. Higgins usually creates more opportunities, and Zach Moss isn't really involved in the passing game like Mixon was. So it's going to be a lot of targets going to Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, and they really just need to protect Joe Burrow and keep him in the full season. They have improved their O-line a little bit, and hopefully that keeps Joe Burrow healthy all year.
For my number 5, I also have Jamar Chase, so we're in agreement for that. Last year was a bad year for Cincinnati fans, and of course Jamar Chase, or a down year, even considering he had 262 fantasy points in a PPR league. The guy ended up still averaging 9 targets a game, and still it seemed like a down year for the guy, right? Everyone was like very disappointed with him. But at the end of the day, he still put up some numbers. So I think that this year with a healthy Joe Burrow and his Slim Shady persona and attitude, you're going to see a little bit of attitude this year with the Bengals. They're going to run the ball in your mouth with Zach Moss, right? That's smash mouth, how they like to run it with Joe Mixon. So that's not going to change. They're going to hopefully pay T. Higgins and keep him on that offense because they're going to need him. Otherwise, they lose a pretty significant part of that air attack. But I think overall, like, there's plenty of targets to go his way. He just needs to take the next step, and I think this year he can.
Totally agree. Now, number 6, I've got A.J. Brown. Another amazing offense that works together like a well-oiled machine. The last 2 seasons, A.J. was just shy of 1,500 receiving yards, but he's going to pass that mark this year. Hurts and Saquon will confuse the defenses enough to create even more space and more opportunities for him. And, the same thing with Devonta Smith. I think when you've got these really good, high-powered offenses, it's usually better for receivers. I mean, it's different if you've got a situation with Tank Dell in Houston where Stephon Diggs and Nico Collins will kind of push him down the ladder. But generally speaking, 2 high-level wide receivers will create more opportunities, and they will feed off each other. And that's what I expect to see with A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith this year. And that's why A.J. is in the number 6 spot for me.
Definitely, our list is pretty interchangeable, like you were saying, and like most experts, right? They might slip in a guy or two. But for my number 6, I do have Mr. Justin Jefferson. And this coming from a guy that I guess early on in the offseason, I actually had Justin Jefferson coming in at number 1, actually, before the J.J. McCarthy injury. I mean,
wow.
I saw J.J. McCarthy's, first preseason game, and I was already like, okay, this guy's going to be the starter, right? He's taking over for Sam Darnold. And so I had him like Justin Jefferson is going to be eaten, because if Kirk Cousins was in Minnesota this year, I would have Justin Jefferson as the number 1 overall pick, right, over anybody, because I knew he'd had that kind of season. So unfortunately, that pushed him down my list a lot more than I like because of Sam Darnold and the uncertainty. And I think if I'm paying that kind of premium for a player, I can't rely on a second and third string quarterback that couldn't even look good in a 49ers offense. And that's what them pulling, they literally pulled just Purdy and put Darnold there, and Darnold still looked like trash. So that to me, and that's when McCaffrey was chasing that touchdown record. And believe you me, I was watching this very closely last year, trying to follow McCaffrey for touchdowns because I had him on my fantasy teams. And then he ended up breaking the streak. It was like week 16 or 17. He ended up missing it, not getting the touchdown. But it was because they put Sam Darnold in there. So not to get on a ramble or side point, but
no, those are good points. I mean,
but I just can't. I don't believe in Darnold, and I can't gamble on him. So that's my whole point.
No, I mean, you do make good points, and I'll just touch on it again because I didn't realize you were that high on J.J. McCarthy, but I love Kirk Cousins, so I completely understand what you're saying. It's a huge change. Obviously, Sam Darnold is a significant downgrade from Kirk Cousins. There's no question about that. But if you look at last year, Justin Jefferson didn't really play with Kirk Cousins. He had Josh Dobbs, Nick Mullins, and maybe Jared Hall. I can't remember if Jared Hall was actually involved or not. But I know he played with Josh Dobbs and Nick Mullins, and he still got over 1,000 yards. So you could be right because Sam Darnold is not the same guy. I think Josh Dobbs is a better quarterback than Sam Darnold. I like Josh Dobbs. If you look at the videos from last year, I was kind of biased towards Josh Dobbs. I feel like he didn't really get a chance at any team he's been on yet.
For me, 1,000 yards is good, but is it first overall pick good, top 5 pick good? No. Like he got injured. Yes, you can't predict injuries, but it was to me, everyone's picking him over CMC, and all these experts had him mocked over CMC last year, and we were like, nah, CMC all day, running backs all day over these guys, and sure enough, that's the way to go, right? It's all we had. It always has been, is the more durable positions to go there. But at the end of the day, that's I guess my point is that I'm just not a fan of that, or that in particular.
Yeah, and I mean, like I said, I do think that Sam Darnold is a problem, but I think Justin Jefferson's a guy that can go above and beyond no matter who's throwing him the ball and overcome those obstacles. But we'll see. I mean, I really hope I'm right just because I love watching Justin Jefferson play football,
Yeah, he's special, all right. And the Eagles passed on him, and we got Jalen Reagor forever etched in my mind. Thank you, Howie.
All right. So at number 7, I've got Puka Nacua. Puka's the real deal. He proved it in many different games last year. I personally believe he's taken over as the number 1 wide receiver on the Rams. I know this year is going to kind of be the test because we're going to see a healthy Cooper Kupp and a healthy Puka right from day one. But for a rookie to finish the season with almost 1,500 receiving yards is insane. And especially with a group of wide receivers that were all really involved in the offense. You had Tutu Atwell in the mix. And I just think that someone like him that's proven, I mean, he's a big guy, he's durable, he plays really hard. I think, again, that two high-level wide receivers are going to complement one each other, and Puka and Cooper are going to have a better season in 2024 than they did in 2023. So he's a freak athlete, big, rough player, loves being on the field. He's always got a smile on his face. I see him easily finishing in the top 10 this year.
I definitely won't disagree with you in the top 10. I have a slightly different player, though, for my number 7. I have Mr. Marvin Harrison Jr. Yeah, that's right. I have a rookie at number 7. Here's why. Marvin Harrison Jr. is one of the most polished prospects you have probably seen in or any scout has seen probably in the last couple of decades. I mean, the funny thing is his comparison is Larry Fitzgerald as far as how ready he is made. And you saw the kind of career Larry Fitzgerald has had. I've seen his camp videos. I've seen his, college videos. And the guy passes the eye test and everything. He looks amazing. He runs amazing routes. And all of that talent has already translated to training camp. And he's burning everybody he's going against. So I just hope he keeps that going and he plays smart. Just like Puka had an amazing rookie season last year, I see Marvin Harrison having the same kind of season with Kyler Murray. Because, Kyler likes to focus in on those wide receivers. And right now, there's nobody on that team better than that guy. And he's going to be feeding him all season long. And no one else in that pecking order. So I'm going to be taking that connection. And that's going to be a really nice stack I'm going to be loving to take advantage of this year as well.
I completely agree with everything you said, and I'll touch on it a tiny bit more in a few minutes. Spoiler alert, he falls just outside of my top 10, but not very far down the list. Now at number 8, I've got Garrett Wilson. He finished his first 2 seasons with over 1,000 receiving yards, and his QBs are garbage. So with Aaron Rodgers back on the field, expect some fireworks, some big plays to add to the highlight reel. With Garrett Wilson, there was really no competition at wide receiver. That hasn't changed. He's the only guy there. Mike Williams is on the Jets now. So hopefully he can stay healthy. I doubt it. But if he stays healthy and creates some space and creates more opportunities for Garrett Wilson, that would be awesome. Because even though Wilson's going to get a massive target share, as I've been saying, I think it helps to have 2 high-level wide receivers to create space and more opportunities, confuse the defense. And right now, I mean, in past 2 seasons, it's only been Garrett Wilson over there with some flashes here and there for some other guys. But really, if Mike Williams doesn't step up to the plate, he'll be double covered. And I would like to see him create more separation. And with Aaron Rodgers leading the team, I see that happening. I see Mike Williams being involved too.
Some talent there for sure. I have a little bit different lineup, of course. This is where our lists are going to start changing pretty significantly, of course, or maybe off by a few players. Obviously, right now I have Puka Nacua, right? We just talked about him. He's coming in at my number 8 for a lot of the reasons you listed. He's a top target. He's a great player, and the only reason why he's coming in at this position is just because the guys above him, with the exception of the rookie, are all proven vets that played a little bit longer than him. But that's pretty much it. And touching up on your guy, Garrett Wilson, I definitely see him with Aaron Rodgers having a really great year for sure.
Yeah, and Aaron Rodgers is going to get him in the end zone a lot more than he did last year. Garrett Wilson only had 3 touchdowns last year. That's definitely going to change. And like you were saying about Puka, he does have some competition from the veterans, Tutu Atwell, Robert Woods, and Cooper Kupp. But last year, that wasn't an issue for him. And I think he has proven that he's the guy that should be getting the majority of the targets there. Obviously, alongside of Cooper Kupp. But we'll have to wait and see. Now, at number 9, I've got – and hear me out, because I know this is a bold prediction, but you know how we do here. We got big balls. So sometimes we got to let them hang. And at the 9 spot, I've got Drake London. He's an extremely talented player that should be getting double-digit targets every game. He finished his first 2 seasons with roughly 900 receiving yards each year, and Kirk Cousins at QB is a huge upgrade. I think he's going to push Drake London to the next level, and you might be able to grab him in kind of the mid rounds where people are sleeping on him because they remember, people that aren't really paying attention remember the last 2 years, and they don't look at him as how much he can improve with Kirk Cousins throwing him the ball.
Yeah, definitely. He will be improving this year, and that is a big balls call for sure. But going on to my number 9, see, we talk about big balls. I think this is kind of a big balls call here. I have Mr. Michael Pittman Jr., wide receiver for the Colts. I think with Anthony Richardson, he's going to have a very big year because he's going to be the red zone target. He's going to get a lot of looks. Shane Steichen is their head coach and offensive. He's going to be their play caller, I'm sure. And he is just such an offensive guru. And last year he got a lot of looks to Pittman, and that's with Gardner Minshew throwing him the ball. So I can't imagine with an actual quarterback like Anthony Richardson. So they're going to do a lot of those fake goal line, sweeps, tosses out there to the streaking wide receiver. You're going to see a lot of goal line packages like that. You're going to see a lot of wide open because they like to run him in the slot a lot. So he has a lot of mismatches. But overall, I just think he's going to have a good, strong season despite, there being some other really talented receivers on the field as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. And he's clearly a number 1. Yeah, there might be some other talented guys on the field. Pierce, I've always liked Pierce, but they're not going to eat into his target share. And I'll talk more about that later. But yeah, he's a big, strong guy, plays rough. Kind of reminds me, he's a similar player to Puka, big dudes that play rough and always having fun out there. At the 10 spot, I've got Mike Evans. Mike Evans has been in the NFL for 10 years, and he's had over 1,000 receiving yards every season. He has great rapport with Baker Mayfield, and he's still very hungry. As we saw last year, every interview you saw with him, that dude stayed hungry his entire career. So there's no reason to doubt him. I expect another big season with over 1,000 receiving yards and double-digit touchdowns. I didn't expect that last year. I was high on him last year, but I did not expect 13 touchdowns. If he can get 10 or get more, that would be amazing. But, he had a lot of yardage, a lot of targets, heavily involved, and I don't see that changing at all.
Yeah, and I'm going to agree with you 100% because that's who I have at number 10 as well, Mike Evans. He had over 10 touchdowns.
Yeah.
He was, and I'd say at least half of them for over 50 yards. Like that.
Yeah,
was
no,
crazy.
he had some monsters. Yeah, he had some really cool plays.
Like if you had Mike Evans last year, you were at 0 points in the first half, and the second half you were at like 30 because the guy was just catching like 2 bombs for like 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. It was crazy. And the guy's a Hall of Famer, right? One of the greatest wide receivers we've probably ever seen. To the first one to start off his career 10 consecutive seasons with 1,000 receiving yards, each year. So, the guy's, has accolades for days. Obviously, Super Bowl winner. So he's going to continue to do it. And Baker loved him. He locked into him. So he's going to look for him again at a second year under his tutelage. You're going to see a lot more comfort level there. And you're probably going to see a lot more consistency to Mike Evans, right? So versus it just being a Hail Mary toss-up, now it's going to be like Mike Evans getting fed all game long. So he might even finish higher on that list than some of these other guys we mentioned.
Yeah, that's a great point. That was their first year together, and if they continue to build that rapport, you're right. It's going to be more comfortable, more consistent. And Baker Mayfield surprised a lot of people last year, including me. At the 11th spot, I've got Nico Collins. I doubted Nico Collins last year. I learned my lesson. He finished with almost 1,300 receiving yards, and he's going to continue making big plays with C.J. Stroud throwing the ball to him. Stephon Diggs, yeah, he's on the team, but like I said earlier, that's just going to create more opportunities for him. Just like they were doing with Tank Dell last year, those guys being the top two, it's now going to be Stephon Diggs and Nico Collins. And Tank Dell's probably going to be heavily involved still, but I see him as the odd man out of those three. And I would not be surprised if Stephon Diggs takes the number one wide receiver spot. But in my opinion right now, that belongs to Nico Collins, and that's why I'm ranking him at number 11 above Stephon Diggs.
Definitely, that's a hard one, right? To judge which one of those two guys are going to be the guy, right? Was it the guy that broke out last year, or the guy that has always been the guy wherever he goes? So yeah, that's big balls call for sure, Joe. For my number 11, I actually have Garrett Wilson. I know you had him higher up on your list. I just have him a little bit farther back. I've been watching a lot of behind the training camp, right, when it was starting off, and could be nothing, right? Could just be shaking off the rust, but Aaron Rodgers just looking a little bit rusty with his ankles. You know, he's limping a little bit. And so that I was just kind of a little bit worried about him getting injured again, what that quarterback situation would look like in New York. We already seen what that story looked like last year. Don't want a repeat of that again. And even despite that, Garrett did have decent production. But I think obviously being drafted in the second round, you want a player that's going to be putting up a lot more consistent points. And I can't put my stock that high into a guy that is investing in a 40-something-year-old quarterback, right? So that's why the only reason why I have Garrett Wilson so far down. Otherwise, he'd be in my top 10.
And that's a valid point. It's a huge question mark with Aaron Rodgers because he has been off for a year. I don't know if his heart's still in the game. You know, he was talking about hosting some game show. Wasn't he? Talking about hosting Jeopardy? But
yeah, he is. Yeah.
But the thing is, I feel like Rodgers is one of those dudes that's so mentally tough that he can extend his career kind of – I'm not comparing him to Brady, but I am. He can extend his career a couple more years just because he's got that mental toughness. And he's a total stud. You know, he's got the skill set too. And I strongly believe he's going to get Garrett Wilson in the end zone more than 3 times. So we'll see. I really hope that I'm right because I drafted Garrett Wilson in one of my leagues last year, and man, that was tough. The only draft pick that was worse was Justin Jefferson. Coming in at the 12th spot for me, I've got Marvin Harrison. Basically the same exact reasons you were saying. Harrison's a beast. He's the number 1 wide receiver for Kyler Murray. 6'4", had over 1,200 receiving yards in his last 2 seasons at Ohio State. The recipe for success is there. We've seen how good he looks in training, and I think he could easily sneak into the top 10 if he develops a quick rapport with Kyler Murray, which appears to be already happening. So you might be more accurate with your call, but right now I have him at the 12th spot.
I actually have Stephon Diggs at number 12. I think that Stephon Diggs is going to have a little bit more of an impact because I think Nico Collins is more of a quiet guy. He's going to kind of give away the number 1 spot to Diggs, so he's happy because they want him to feel welcome. So and basically Diggs wants to come in and be that guy. So they're going to feed him a lot, but they're also going to feed Nico a lot. And I think ultimately at the end of the day, the possession guy for the red zone might ultimately I think it'll be a dead split down the middle, but I think ultimately they might try to favor a little bit more to Diggs. So that's the only reason why I have him at number 12 over maybe Nico.
Yeah, those are all good points, and I'm just going to continue on that because at 13 I have Stephon Diggs. I mean, you're talking about 2 spots. I have Nico Collins at 11, Stephon Diggs at 13. Basically, everything you said is true. I could see a lot of games similar to what we saw with Tank Dell last year where from one week to the next, they're going back and forth as the top receiver on the team. It's hard to predict right now, but Stephon Diggs is Stephon Diggs. He's been a beast his entire career. 1,000 receiving yards over the last 6 seasons. Always hungry. Love his attitude. Love his pissed off play style. Expect him to have a huge impact in Houston. And I love Joe Mixon being there too. Just that offense will come together so well, just like the Detroit Lions, and create a lot of confusion on defense and more opportunities on offense. Would not be surprised if he actually quickly becomes the wide receiver 1. But right now, I'm giving that spot to Nico Collins, but I really don't know. It could easily be Stephon Diggs.
Yeah, and that's my number 13 is Nico Collins, right? He has the rapport with C.J. Stroud, right? Are they going to knock him back a peg, to make Diggs fit in? That's what I think they're going to do. It's Bobby Slowick's offense, right, for the offensive coordinator. And they do a really good job at taking players and utilizing their strengths. And Diggs' strength is a lot of possession, right? So they're going to be using him a lot more in the red zone. They're going to be using Nico to stretch out the field a lot more. So you'll see Diggs break open a lot, but they're going to want him to be like more of the third down guy, clutch guy. So you're going to see him catching a little bit like that. But I think Nico is going to get you a little bit more yardage, and therefore they're going to end up very close in yardage, and or very close in points. And last year having a target share of 7.2 targets per game, despite not having much competition, doesn't really have me jumping all over the place thinking his target share is going to go up by much with Diggs there,
Yeah, definitely fair. Good points. Now you're making me think a little more. Now at number 14, I've got Devontae Adams. Sometimes I think I should have him in the top 10 because when you look back at the things he does, the plays he makes, he's going to be successful with basically any quarterback. Similar to what I was saying about Justin Jefferson, they're quarterback proof. But the team as a whole still concerns me. Last year, he wasn't quite the guy that everyone expected, and Jacoby Myers tapped into his target share a little bit. But once Devontae once he built that rapport, he was the guy. It was clear he was the guy, and I do expect that to continue. He's going to have a massive target share, and he always finds the end zone. So, he had 8 touchdowns last year, and, that's on a new team where he was trying to get accustomed to the offense. Now that he's been there for a year, he's going to be more comfortable and probably just continue moving up the ladder, and Jacoby's going to kind of level out.
I have a slightly different player at my number 14 here. I actually have Cooper Kupp at my number 14. And the reason being is because last year he did get injured early on. So he kind of came back a little bit slow, or it's either he got injured early and didn't play late. Got injured a little bit later and didn't play. He was injured early and didn't play till later, right? Because that's where Puka really took off, was in the beginning half of the season. It took him a long time to really get back to, form or shape. And knowing him, the kind of player he is, he's going to get back to normal in no time, right? And now that he has a player that could take the attention off him, he's going to go back to being the tactician that he is. Similar to how we talked about Nico Collins and Stephon Diggs, I see those two with the same dynamic. Puka is the stretch guy. He's going to be the Y guy, or actually he's going to be the guy that's going to be stretching the field, getting it wide open. And then obviously the possession guy is going to be where Cooper Kupp, right? He's going to be the tactician, the third down, the clutch guy.
Yeah, so moving the chains.
Exactly. And Matt Stafford's going to be trying to move the ball a lot. So especially because their defense isn't very good, so they're going to be down a lot of games. So that's going to cause them to be scoring a lot, and they were a juggernaut last year. So expect much of the same to repeat this year.
I don't know if you remember last year how many people in in all our different leagues were hanging on to him, just hoping that he's going to come back and be that guy. And I think you're right that he was not 100% for the duration of the season. It's kind of like the same thing we saw with Jonathan Taylor, where he really didn't get back until the end of the season.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you don't want to rush back from an injury, especially when, you know, it's a knee injury and you're kind of just trying to ease back into 100%. We've seen it happen too many times, specifically with knee injuries, where someone comes back a little too quickly and then their career's kind of done. So good call. I hope Cooper is 100% healthy and we get to see him like we saw him a few years ago. Now at the 15 spot, I have Chris Olave. I've never really embraced all the hype around Chris Olave, and there's been so much hype around him since he came into the league for good reason. But just as I said a few minutes ago with Davante Adams and the Raiders, it's the entire offense that concerns me. He's passed over 1,000 yards his first 2 seasons, and I'm sure he's going to have another solid season. But I'm just a little concerned about the team as a whole. The Saints have been rocky for the last couple years. Derek Carr is a good quarterback, but he's streaky. And, you know, a lot of the time when you get to the red zone, you've got Kamara eating up those targets or Taysom Hill. And I'm just a little bit concerned about the offense, but Chris Olave is a rock solid player. He's a great wide receiver 2 to have on your team or a flex to have on your team. So I'm sure he's going to have another good year. I'm sure he's going to pass 1,000 yards, but the offense as a whole concerns me, especially since they have one of the worst offensive lines in the team. You got to protect your quarterback and keep Derek Carr in the whole season. We'll see if that happens. I hope it does, you know, for Chris Olave's sake and for Alvin Kamara. But I'm just not sure. Too many question marks for me right now to rank him above 15.
Olave has a pretty good target share since he's been there, and Carr has loved this deep man ever since he's been in the league. That's for sure. I have him a little bit farther down the list, but going into my number 15, I do have Davante Adams. The reason why I have him at 15 instead of a little bit higher than most experts have him is because they did just name Gardner Minshew as a starting quarterback. I think that can help him overall on his fantasy, but I don't know what kind of identity the Raiders are going to have this year. They lost Josh Jacobs. They also had, you know, Jacoby Myers last year get a lot more targets than Davante Adams. And yet Davante still had a solid season. He still had over 1,000 yards. He still had 10 targets a game. 175 targets on the season. He was almost, he was 6 targets away from being the leading man in the league for target share. So it's not like he wasn't getting his looks. It just wasn't consistent. So as far as that overall, I think he can get a little bit more consistent target share with Gardner Minshew, but he has to stay healthy and he has to keep the job, because it could be a quarterback carousel over there in Las Vegas once again this year.
Yeah, very good points. I mean, that's a good way to put it, that they're trying to find their identity, and that carousel quarterbacks definitely concerns me too. Now at the 16th spot, I have DK Metcalf. Another freak athlete, huge guy. It's like 6'4", 240. I expect him to have another solid season. Not a lot has changed in Seattle. So you kind of know what to expect when you draft him. About 1,000 yards and 8 to 10 touchdowns. Last year, he did great. He's always fun to watch. And Lockett, as we were saying before, is a nice complement to his game. You're going to have those strange games where Lockett comes out on top, here and there. But overall, I like DK a lot more. And Geno Smith is consistent enough where you can trust DK. And you are going to have those huge games with DK too, where, he's in possibly the top 5 for wide receivers that week. So he's a great guy to have as your wide receiver too. And don't be surprised if he climbs up into the top 10, because we saw a few flashes last year where it looked like he was going to go down that path.
Yeah, he's a very talented player. Great offense. Geno Smith is not a bad quarterback whatsoever. Very consistent. And 2 years ago he was comeback player of the year, wasn't he? So he had a very good season. So for my number 16, I do have DJ Moore from Chicago. He has Caleb Williams throwing him the ball, so he's going to be a very consistent force this year. He's a very good route runner, so I'm excited to see someone that can actually throw the ball to get it to him. Justin Fields has, he's showing his true colors again. Obviously, it's preseason, but we don't really judge. Kenny Pickett, same thing, right? They're showing their true colors. So for me, I just want to see this guy succeed. So Moore will be the top option there. He's going to get some big yards. Caleb's going to let that ball go, and I could see him being one of your best fantasy wide receivers. And he ended up being in the top 7 last year anyways, and that's considering the guy didn't even get a consistent workload until like second half of the season almost.
Yeah, because the first half he was very quiet, and then the second half he was just exploding. That was so fun to watch.
Ridiculous. I got him in a couple leagues via trade after his slump, and let me tell you, it paid dividends and then some.
Now at the 17 spot, actually a good bit distance away from you, I have Michael Pittman Jr. Another great player that everyone's expecting to have a breakout season. But with that said, he's been rock solid the last 3 years. And with Anthony Richardson back on the field, I see Pittman just going to the next level, putting up some very impressive numbers, but he needs to find the end zone. He had 4 touchdowns last year. I expect that number to double this year. And he's still averaged over 15 fantasy points a game. He's very involved in the offense. And with a healthy JT and a healthy Anthony Richardson, they're going to have more opportunities spread out the field, and he's going to be a very, very consistent player. In my opinion, a lot more consistent than last year.
For my number 17, I actually have DK Metcalf, which is only a couple spots away from you. DK is number 1 on his team. He's had some really big weeks over the last couple of seasons. Why do I have him this far back? Yada, yada. And I thought about it. He only had like 7.5 targets a game last year. And that's with Tyler Lockett, Jackson Smith, and the Jigba on the team. So I think that looking at it this year, I think Jackson Smith and Jigba is getting a bigger role. So, and maybe if Lockett gets traded, maybe that does give him a bigger role, but I don't see that happening so far until the trade deadline, maybe. So as far as that's concerned, I still think he'll be a great, solid addition, like as a wide receiver to your team. But he's not going to be the star we probably expected him to be a couple of seasons ago. So if you get him and he's your best receiver on your team, you better have some really stud running backs, because unfortunately your league's probably going to be a long season.
We've seen the ups and downs with DK. That's like the most frustrating thing about him as a player. You see a couple of those big games and start him, and then you see a couple of those duds. It's just the way it is. Now, at the 18 spot, I have Brandon Ayuk. His receiving yardage has increased with every season so far. He's looked better every year on the field too, like visually when you're watching him play. He just looks better and better. And I see that continuing this year. If he can reach double-digit touchdowns, I think that's going to lock him in as the wide receiver 1 on the 49ers. But if you look at the stats from last year, he had more touches than Debo, and Debo's a really, really good player, but he was a lot more involved before McCaffrey got in the mix, because he was pretty much the running back too. So now with him not running the ball like he used to, and CMC just taking over as that workhorse, I feel like Brandon Ayuk has kind of proven himself already as the wide receiver 1. So that's why I have him at the 18th spot. He's been slowly eating into Debo's target share, and I think that's just going to continue this year.
Yeah. Ayuk he's a talented player. He's the true wide receiver 1 on that team. And you're right. Debo's a wide back, and his role is diminishing, and he was paid number 1 numbers. And now 49ers realize they got a dilemma on their hands. And me as an Eagles fan, I love it because now they have a problem with payroll. So, oh well.
And let's also remember that Debo's got a pretty long injury history too.
Yeah. So they signed the wrong guy because if they lose Ayuk, then it was all for naught. But for my number 18, I, of course, have a guy you had a little bit higher up. I think you had him at 15, but Chris Olave. I had him farther on my list before. I did have to bump him up because with Derek Carr, he had 8.6 targets a game, and that's pretty good. He averaged almost 15 points a game in PPR formats. So he was a pretty consistent scorer. He didn't have anything too sexy. He wasn't blowing up the scoreboard, but he was getting you your consistent 14 points to 15 points a game, week in, week out. So that's the kind of player you like as later on in the draft. But for his ADP, he's simply getting grabbed in the 3rd or 4th round. I don't think that's worth it for a player that, you're only getting 14 points a game from. I mean, in the 4th round, you grab yourself still a 15 to 20 point running back, or there's higher scoring wide receivers, in my opinion, possibly, depending on who's on the board. So not necessarily, my top choice, but you are taking a risk with Derek Carr, right? So, and Spencer Rattler isn't really, giving me the warm and fuzzies either. So to me, I do have him talent-wise as number 18, but overall it's still a question mark.
And you're right. I didn't give him enough credit for his consistency. He was very consistent last year, getting you 14, 15 points. And that's not bad at all, I'd take that over the ups and downs that you might get with someone like DK Metcalf, but that's just my opinion. Now at number 19, I've got DJ Moore. He's been quietly producing his entire career. He finished last season with 1,364 receiving yards and 8 touchdowns, and then total, he had 9 touchdowns, averaged 17 fantasy points per game. And, I mean, the problem is he's been stuck on 2 bad teams that can't find a reliable quarterback. I think that's going to change with Caleb Williams leading the Bears. And if they find a good rapport, he could easily be in the top 10. No question.
Yeah. And for the reasons I listed as well, I'm a big fan of DJ Moore. He's going to be the number 1, and he's going to continue to dominate. For my number 19, I have a guy here that has been overlooked only because he hasn't had a good quarterback in a long time, and he finally has one. But scary Terry McLaurin, he has got Jaden Daniels throwing him the football now. Last year he was averaging almost eight targets a game. He had over 210 fantasy points for the season, and that's in PPR formats, of course, guys. And he was averaging 12 points a game, so he wasn't really lighting up the scoreboard, but he had some really hard catches. And let's just face it, the Washington football team was just a dumpster fire of football players. So to be able to do that with that kind of team was really impressive. So I actually think they look pretty good this year with all the free agent acquisitions. So it remains to be seen how good of a season he'll have, but I think it'll be a step in the right direction.
Yeah, and I was high on a few different players last year. You know how high I was on Jahan Dotson. And Sam Howell impressed a lot of people. There were a few weeks where he was finishing in the top 3, top 5. And the issue is just with their consistency, and their offensive line is horrible. So I love Jaden Daniels this year. I think he's going to be an absolute beast. And I see Terry McLaurin being a huge benefactor of that success. Rounding out my top 20, I have my boy Rashee Rice. Everyone's been waiting on a wide receiver one in Kansas City since Tyreek left, and I believe Rashee Rice is that guy. You know, you obviously have Travis Kelce pretty much operating as the wide receiver one since Tyreek left, but I think that right now we're seeing Kelce kind of slow down a little bit, and you know, Rashee Rice just finished his rookie season with 938 receiving yards and 7 touchdowns. Expect those numbers to get better as he continues to build his rapport with, you know, one of the best quarterbacks in the league in Patrick Mahomes. They're a very involved offense all around. You know, you got every defense wondering what they're going to do. It doesn't seem to matter with Patrick Mahomes who he's throwing the ball to. He's going to spread the ball out. He's going to make plays. And I think with Rashee Rice getting more comfortable in that offense, it's just a recipe for success where I see him getting well past 1,000 receiving yards and possibly double-digit touchdowns.
Okay. That is actually a big balls call. I don't all the mock drafts I see and everything I see online, no one even has Rashid to the top 20 because is he facing a suspension or anything for that DUI arrest, or has nothing come back down the pipeline yet?
I don't think they've said anything yet, and just the way the NFL is, I feel like he's going to get out of it.
Yeah,
because that's usually what they do is give him a pass.
If that's the case, I mean, what you're saying, like, threw him up my draft boards for sure. Like, I don't know if the top 20, but definitely higher than I had him before, you know, by a lot. So it made me think a lot. I was like, well, I got to look more into that suspension because is there even a suspension, or am I assuming, you know?
No, they are talking about one, but last time I checked, nothing has been put in writing about it being official. And we've seen over the years so many different players that are facing a suspension and then it gets pushed. You know, Alvin Kamara is a perfect example of that, but you know, we'll see.
Yeah, definitely a big balls call right there, Joe. I like it. I like it a lot.
That's right.
Rounding off my top 20, the final guy to squeeze in there is a guy that you had way higher up here. I think you had him in your top 10, but I have Drake London at number 20. He did manage to stay on the list. Kirk Cousins' addition does keep him on that list. He is a top guy there. I do, however, think that Kirk Cousins is not going to come back till a couple weeks in, right? Because he did tear his Achilles later on in the season. So that's still a 9-month recovery, and he doesn't have any superhuman genes or anything like that. He's just a nerdy white dude from suburbia. You know, like,
right.
No offense to any of those guys out there, but you know, you see somebody like Nick Chubb, for example, right? Tore his ACL, PCL. He's over here squatting 500 pounds, or like Saquon Barkley. They're like superhumans.
Yeah.
And then you get Kirk Cousins. I was like, I think he's like me. He's going to take the regular time to recover, right?
Oh,
As a matter of fact, I might take longer than the normal athlete because I'm screwed up.
Yeah. I'm sure they're pumping him full of some good shit, but yeah, you're right. He's not superhuman.
Yeah, so that's going to take off a couple games. So that's why I had him drop in my rankings. And right now he's going around the 3rd round. So for me, I'd rather take in the 4th round, you know, Nico Collins, Stephon Diggs, Cooper Kupp, you know, those guys we're talking about. These guys are all going in the same range. And that's why I have them near the bottom of the list, because I don't want to be forced to take a guy that I think could possibly be affected early on when those wins really matter, you know?
Yep. Absolutely true. Thank you for tuning in this week, Ballers. And if you disagree with any of those top 20, please leave a comment below. We appreciate any feedback. It's very valuable to us. It helps us improve. And if there's any sleepers that you got that we missed, we appreciate that insight too, because we will use that for our fantasy leagues. You know, we like an exchange. We like to hear your ideas. So please leave a comment below if there's a sleeper in your top 20. Yeah,
and we do appreciate the feedback. I don't need any help. I'm just kidding. I am open to hearing what perspectives, definitely. But as far as fantasy leagues, we appreciate you guys looking at ours. We will be coming in next week with our top 15 quarterbacks, so please tune in for that. That's going to be fun. Tight ends coming in the week after. But we do appreciate everybody for stopping in once again for another episode of the Fantasy Fumble. And you folks have a great rest of the week, okay? All right. You guys take care.